Hello, my name is Clara José Muñoz Zavala, and this is my final reflection for Latin American cinema to tell and to disappear. So first, we start with Chile. We learn about the gender regime and social platform of wealth distribution, but it was overthrown by a coup d'etat in September 11 of 1973. And during the dictatorship of Pinochet, many people were made disappear, and the lucky ones who seek refuge was in Cuba because Cuba had its revolution in 1959 and now was a communist country. Um, and this country actually had a film industry that focused in overthrowing the propaganda from the United States. Then we moved to Argentina, who had multiple coups d'etats. So in their final coup d'etat in 1976, there was not much resistance. We learned about the Madres y Abuelas de la Plaza de Mayo who were made seen as emotional terrorists. We learn about the Truth and Reconciliation and how forensic anthropology were brought to this country because of habeas corpus that needed the corpses to show that there was a crime. And the interesting role of the United States as a oppressor who destabilizes these countries and also as a person who helped to re-stabilize them. We learned that the disappeared were mostly young population in this country, and the children were also made disappear, children from women who were pregnant when they were kidnapped or got pregnant because of the rapes in the um, clandestine centers. Then we moved to Peru, and their period of terror was from the 1980s to the mid-1990s. We learned this country had multiple aggressors, the Shining Path, the government, the military police, and other opposers. And the victims were mostly indigenous people. And we learned that collective grief not only applies to victims, but also to the victimizers. And there were some countries like Colombia that still don't have the Truth and Reconciliation period because they just finally finished the civil war, so the people still trying to survive. Then we moved to Guatemala. Here, Jacobo Arbenz also had a platform that focused in agrarian reform to distribute also the wealth. But this was the first coup d'etat that was directly supported by the U.S. government because Jacobo Arbenz didn't agree with Howard that Guatemala should continue supporting the U.S. through product consumptions without having Guatemala have its own autonomy, meaning becoming bringing this agrarian reform. This country actually had a genocide because most of the people who were killed were indigenous people. Rios Montt, who was in power at the time, was now charged as in for crimes of genocide. And this country with El Salvador and Honduras are the countries that had the more exodus of people to the United States because the U.S. government destabilizes these small countries. Then we move to Central America, and here we focus in a little bit more in El Salvador. We learn about the School of Americas, how this school actually committed multiple human violations, and it was closed because of the continuous protests. But in its place was open WINSEC, which is the same thing. The only difference was a 40-hour training on human rights. We learned that the Salvador Civil War was from 1970s to 1980s, and here the comadres was the same as las madres y las abuelas de la Plaza de Mayo. The only difference is that here now they've moved more into feminist movements because they realize that you cannot have human rights without having women's rights. And here also we learned that no stable government give more opportunities to maras, which means gangs, to have more power over people. So now that disappear not only from civil war, but also from gangs violence. Then we move to Arizona. Here we learned that multiple policies affect the migration, the CB 1070, people being pushed to the 10 years part of the border, and also the Programa de Frontera Sur, which increased the violence when trying to detain migration in the borders. We learned that many of the migrants take the Bestia, which is a train that crosses from Chiapas all the way to the United States. But here, we also learned the difference between the Golden Dream and the Holiday Auto. In the Golden Dream, people believe that coming in the U.S. is gonna be paradise, but in reality, it's a golden cage, meaning that you are technically a slave, just working to survive. and we learn about the forensic work and how there is a lack of resources, but in the past few years they have been able to have more connections with other entities and help families, but there's still a lot of work that has to be done. A personal experience, I I thought of myself as a victim when in reality I'm more of a bystander. My childhood was mostly similar to the kids in these movies that we saw. I I participated in many protests and marches because my mom was part of the people who was in a lot of political movements. Actually, when Manuel López Obrador was barely running, trying to run for elections, my mom was one of their supporters, and I actually appeared in the newspapers as shaking his hand because I was that kid that they used as a propaganda in my hometown. I remember asking the adults about questions about what was going on, but I don't even remember my own questions nor the complete explanations. All I remember is one telling me, well, we, the poor, only support the wealthy who help us just a little bit more than the other one. I, uh, I didn't have the right to criticize the non-ethical decisions of some of the characters in these movies because I also ignore people who seek for help. Um, in my hometown, I also saw guy getting killed, but between helping this person and getting involved in something dangerous, putting my family in danger, I would rather ignore this poor person, which is what I did. And we, me and another group of people, we just look at him while he was dying, and sometimes the situation is so great that you have to look for your family m- more for your family than the other person, even though you know it's an innocent person. Um, I never realized how militarized my childhood was, mostly because my mom tried to keep me in the bubble of like, don't pay attention to this, just focus, come back home from school from home, don't go out. I thought it was normal. I always saw tracks of military going around every day. And reality didn't hit me until I started watching these movies. And I actually started watching the movies right after this fourth week. That's when I started getting behind my assignments because for me it was too much. The movies for me was more like a slap in the face telling me that I was a hypocrite because I always told myself I wanted to work in this, but I never actually did something to it nor tried to learn of it. What learning was from books, which is completely different when you actually see it with your eyes. And well, yeah, I it's hard because even family directly to me, like my mom or my sister, who have experienced terrible experiences because of the violence in my country. I know it exists, and I know they're one of the people who hate talking about it, don't talk about it. So we decide to just forget. And I feel like I now I'm forgetting what my initial goal was when I came to this country because now I'm experiencing more peace compared to my other classmate and family. Even today, I received a call from a teacher. Well, my sister received a call and he also sent me a text. He was in the middle of a course because when I met him in middle school, he was like such a laid back teacher. Like if I had to choose a song to describe him was Vive la Vida Loca. And now he became a cop in one of the sierras. I don't remember from which state, and he was lynched, like beat up because he tried to help this kid who was sexually assaulted in every possible way by a multiple man, and he became a cop to help these people, and he was stressing out because in the middle of the court they were gonna let these people go free. And it just hits reality. It just hits me that I'm already surrounded by all this, but because I live here in the US, I ignore it. So I haven't even bothered to check the news nor know what was going on around me. And it's not like I'm not aware of it because I keep receiving news. Like a few weeks ago, I already have an ex-classmate who was already killed. And the movies just makes me think, what gives me the right to ignore it and not try to help? So for me, I believe that instead of focusing too much in just trying to survive, I should also try to help the people who I originally wanted to help instead of just wasting my time like I've been doing it. Um, and yeah, those are my thoughts for my final reflection. Thank you.